Well, release the Kraken.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another Unleashing the Kraken. We apologize for a little bit of inconvenience as it pertains to our consistency of this past week. We were just so busy with long form interviews, editing, things like that, as many of you see now. And of course, as the members see, because there was so
Yeah.
much content put on there.
No, you don't realize how somehow tiring it is to sit in a chair and really grill someone. But
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. With that being said, though, let's sort of do a recap on the news of the past few days. We decided not to cover anything COVID related for this one, simply because we
you
feel
guys
many of
seen it
you
all.
you guys have seen
Yeah.
it all. You've heard enough. With that being said, you want to take it away, Camden, for this
Yeah,
one?
sure. From Disclosed TV, top court, European Union law breaks Poland's constitution. So Poland's highest court sides with the Polish government amid the country's dispute with the European Union. Parts of the EU are incompatible with the Polish constitution, and the Constitutional Court has decided the new ruling. The attempt by the European Court of Justice to interfere in the Polish judicial system violates the rule of primacy of the Constitution, and the rule of sovereignty is preserved in the process of European integration. So basically, this is an interesting one to watch because they're not leaving the EU over it. They're basically just saying us even being a member of the European Union is violating our constitution because of what you've said we had to do to even be in it. So we'll see where it goes from here. It's
Right. Just very quickly, if we see here at the bottom, and I quote, because of the reforms, the EU Commission has already opened several infringement proceedings against the government in Warsaw and has filed lawsuits with the European Court of Justice, among other things. The Brussels Authority has also has doubts about the independence of the Polish Constitutional Court, which is now determined that national law takes precedence over EU law, end quote. Now, again, this goes back. Generally speaking, we can sort of correlate this to Afghanistan with respects to
right.
should there be involvement, should there not be, that sort of mentality of globalistic mentality versus the sort of
Nationalistic.
nationalistic.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Now we could argue there is a common ground to be found, but again, that still doesn't answer the question and the conversation that no one seems to be having on the appropriate I guess you could say world stages about
Yeah.
what do we do about certain nations that are, they want to respect their own culture, their own rules, their own laws, but at the same time, they want to be part of this global community.
It's
It's very tough.
transnational. It's yeah,
Right.
you have to give up stuff, I guess. But
Yep.
I wouldn't. If I was them, I'd stand my ground too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The next thing is that according to the New York Post, the U.S. government is ordering Google to provide users search data, according to a recent report. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, what we'll see here is that the U.S. federal government is secretly ordering Google and other search engines to track and provide data on anyone who searches certain terms through, quote, keyword warrants, end quote. According to a new report, this was accidentally unsealed by Forbes, believe it or not, in unsealed court documents. Now, interestingly enough, end quote, before I go on, my whole perspective is this. The reason why I'm very sort of, I take a deep breath or a sigh, as some of
Right.
you know, when it comes to this stuff, the privacy stuff, is because in my opinion, sadly, the genie's already out of the bottle. To say that this wasn't the ability to be collected, this type of data 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that's
Yeah.
just my perspective. Maybe I'm wrong, but Camden, what do you?
No, now they've got to tell you about it before they go and do something about it now. It might have before just been let's practice data collection, but now they really want to do something with this stuff they've collected and looked into of everyone. And so they can't not tell us about it before they just do stuff. So I would it's a drop feeding of what's to come, sort of.
Exactly. If we see here very quickly, if you could scroll up a
Yeah.
bit more, perfect. In an effort to track them down, officials ordered Google to provide any information on users, including account names, IP addresses, and cookie IDs that searched the victim's name, two spellings of her mother's name, and her address over 16 days throughout the year. End quote. Again, to say that these algorithms have not already been out there, the fact that it's good that it's being reported, but I mean, come on.
I mean, they get to, it's that same thing. They get to wrap it up in, yes, a moral, like, upstandingness of terrorism or child safety. That's what they're basically quoting here, right? Someone was searching someone up, someone was trying to find someone, so they've, through keyword warrants, they were able to get the guy that took this 16-year-old or victim, I guess. But like, it's just a slippery slope. Not even a slope, it's a slippery cliff.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. 100%.
Wuhan scientists and U.S. researchers plan to create new coronaviruses in 2018. Consortium led by Brit Peter Daszak asked DARPA to fund research lab in the city where COVID pandemic began. So in 2018, I mean, this is facts now, right? It's the same thing as China started ordering N95 masks before any outbreaks happen. It's the same thing as this. Just points to a fishiness of the gain of function industry.
We're just short at this point of the mainstream media saying that it was, Echo Health,
Right.
Peter Daszak, and things like that. Now, again, not saying that we should dismiss the CCP entirely, but ultimately it just shows how much of a stage the world is in terms of the way the strings metaphorically are pulled. Again, this goes back to, not to always reference it, but Project LACE, low-level augmentative crossbreeding experimentation.
Right.
You're telling me these countries aren't working together at various levels, while at the same time, having a bit of a confrontational kinetic standoff with each other in the South China Sea. But then you see things like this working together on, what seem to be bioweapons. Just the media just won't report it in that way,
Right.
but it could be phrased in that term, arguably.
I mean, it's just, like, why work together on this but not on so much else? It's an interesting point, to say the least.
Absolutely. The next thing is that, according to Al Jazeera, Dubai leader ordered ex-wife and lawyers' phones hacked. According to UK court, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum rejected the allegations by the court, saying they presented an incomplete picture. End quote. Again, to say, if we see here very quickly, Dubai's ruler ordered the phones of his ex-wife and her lawyers to be hacked as part of a, quote, sustained campaign of intimidation and threat, end quote, during the custody battle over their children, England's High Court ruled. And, end quote, they used, the sophisticated Pegasus software developed by Israeli firm NSO. Again, going back to the whole thing of Pegasus is the new promise software, and of course they're going to do it. I mean, it's coming out now, but ultimately this has been going on for years and years and years. I'm even
It's
surprised
just this guy slipped up and decided to do it on his wife in a personal matter. That's right. I guess, that's the difference here.
It also makes me think too, before we go on, the sort of element of those in which are exposed to that, of the media these days, because this would not have been a story even 10 years ago. This would have been much easier to cover up. So it's interesting to see the openings, the metaphorical cracks and openings that seem to be the case with these elites. Now, maybe it's pre-planned, but again, that's up for speculation.
Absolutely, yeah. The UN accused of turning a blind eye to the Yemen abuses. Yemen is not great right now. Yemen activists denounced the United Nations and its former envoy Martin Griffiths for ignoring rights breaches, putting politics before humanity. It seems like they really have here. Human rights advocates from southern Yemen have accused the United Nations of turning a blind eye to human rights violations committed in areas under government control at the hands of what they described as terrorist groups. This is a human rights crisis that has been going on. It has been going on. It's not like we haven't mentioned it before, but also it's worth bringing up that these things are going on everywhere, and we have to remember that our problems are almost always not as bad as someone else's.
Yep. And if I could throw in very quickly as well, too, we have to also consider the realistic fact that, again, the main episodes, particularly the members episodes, point to this as well. But the U.S. has very heavy influence over the UN, over NATO, that whole thing. They're going to turn a blind eye to certain things that don't concern them if there's no interest or anything like that. And you might have these human rights advocates, coming forward with this, but I would dare to say that what's going to come of this? Again,
Right. It
the
doesn't
issue.
fit their narrative.
Right, exactly. The issue is just going to remain in that regard an issue. It's not going to go past that. I mean,
That's
you see how quickly the European Union, which the US also has quite a bit of influence on, whether we say that officially or not, you see how quickly they filed a motion against what's going on with respects to what we just reported with pardon my, what was the country again?
Are you talking about the guy Dubai, the UAE?
No, not Dubai, the disclose article.
Oh, Poland.
Poland, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, with Poland there. It's the same idea. See how quickly they filed appeals and everything's on paper and they're moving
Right.
fast. Why didn't they move this quickly in this case? And again, I know it's contextual and things like that, but
But
realistically,
is it? I mean, come on,
yeah,
bureaucracy takes its time when it wants, and
right.
doesn't when it
Yep,
doesn't.
exactly.
The CIA announces a new mission focusing solely on China. Things are absolutely heating up, as all of you probably have realized in Taiwan. Intelligence agency head says group will focus on adversarial Chinese government, calling it the most important threat to the U.S. But we will love to work on bioweapons with them, just to be clear.
Right.
Has announced a new group that will focus solely on China and the strategic challenges posed by Beijing. In a statement Thursday, they've started a China Mission Center formed to address the global challenges posed by the People's Republic of China that cuts across the agency's mission areas. So, like, just because they have a mission and an interest, let's say over here in Afghanistan, that is no longer the China Mission Center doesn't like that because that cuts across the agency's mission areas. This isn't like it's just go
I
back
couldn't.
home.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. Again, we don't know how much of this is a show. Again, this is the
Right.
CIA, right? We don't know how much of this is actually, occurring with respects to China and the CCP. Now, again, we could talk about the kinetic confrontation, but we can also argue very strongly the only ones that are going to be knocked off the chessboard metaphorically are the everyday person. Right. You
Right.
look at Taiwan, planes being flown by Taiwan. If this is one big chess game, I mean, we also look at the fact that there was a New York Times article somewhat connects to this pertaining to the CIA openly admitted and sent official cables to all of their outposts around the world, whether
Right.
covert or not, saying that a lot of their assets have been flipped or turned and or have been double agents or, triple, quadruple agents or have just been, claiming to be loyal to the CIA, but just selling to information to the highest bidder.
Right.
Again, one thing I have to say was just before this recording, I watched a clip of Putin saying that what he sees happening with the West now is similar to the Soviet Union in terms of they were so powerful that when one problem after another came up, they would just brush it aside like, oh, no problem, no problem. But then the problems,
we're too big to fail kind of attitude.
right.
Yeah.
And then the problems added up to the point where it imploded and caused a collapse. Again, we got to be vigilant to what Putin says, but in this case, I'm almost inclined to agree with him,
Yeah.
especially with what we see here.
Uh,
The next thing, thank you. Sorry. The next thing is that according to Al Jazeera, Peru's President Castillo swears in a new prime minister, the left-wing former head of Congress, Mirtha Vasquez, following resignation of Guido Bellido after just 2 months in the job. If we scroll down a little bit, we'll see here that the move keeps Castillo, and I quote, a member of a Marxist-Leninist party on the left of the political spectrum, but it is likely to mean a more moderate cabinet. Castillo kept center-left economy minister Pedro Frank in the role and named a few ministers for energy and mines, Eduardo Gonzalez Toro, end quote. Look, assuming there's no corruption, there's no issues, this is just a country going about its affairs. I don't see what the issue is unless...
yeah, no issue. I guess the question would be why the previous person stepped down after only 2 months, because we do have a lot of people stepping down on corruption allegations all over the world right now. We point to Australia. Is it Turkey, Hungary, who just had someone step down?
Austria.
Today? Austria. There's a lot of people getting accused and stepping down immediately. I don't know what the...
Well, it's made
Not
many
guilty.
speculate if the Pandora Papers were some type of CIA operation, particularly because if you look at some of the ministers and individuals in those implicated in those papers, very few of them are that of America and its allies. The rest of the world, they're all there. So it's quite peculiar to see, right?
It's not like America's not doing offshore money hiding, but whatever.
It's interesting
Moscow,
that again. Sorry,
go ahead.
just one last thing that woman retires, the ex-president, excuse me, retires in, you know, maybe there was something coming down the pipeline and it was
Right.
just, let's get ahead of it, let me step down and then, you know, nip that in the bud on her own. So anyways,
I
you
mean, I
were
can't
saying,
be
sorry.
upset that these people are getting like called out for corruption either,
Right,
right?
right. Yeah.
Moscow says NATO expulsions undermine chances of normalization, like anything's going to be normal ever again. The Transatlantic Security Alliance has stripped accreditation from 8 members of Russia's mission over Moscow's maligned activity. Moscow was slammed in NATO's decision to expel several members of its Russian mission, saying it undermines hopes of normalizations to ties with the US-led bloc. The Kremlin's response on Thursday came after NATO removed 8 members of the Russians' mission, calling them undeclared Russian intelligent officers. Basically, they're saying that they had spies in NATO.
I'm a big shocker there. And
Yeah, isn't everyone spying for and
yeah.
reporting back?
And yeah, everyone is spying. Everyone is, again, we have someone in our Patreon that gave a perfect example of the way business really goes, or in some cases would go at the UN or NATO or the European Union. They have their official meetings, the cameras are on and everything, then the cameras turn off for the official closed room meetings. And then after that, when, I know it sounds funny, but when all these individuals, when they go, you know, to the restroom to freshen up, or they go, you know, take a piss or whatever,
Powder their nose.
powder, right, so things like that. That's exactly how these intelligence agencies would get them. Maybe not necessarily with blackmail, always per se, but at the same time having off the record conversations and saying, listen, you know, if there's an ambassador in taking a leak in the bathroom, another individual comes on behalf of another nation and says,
Right.
look, you're going to get X amount of cash or money wired to you in an offshore bank, or it's going to be delivered to you in physical cash, and you're going to vote no on this decision or something. This happens all the time. It's just constant tit for tat chess games. So I
Yeah.
don't, personally, I don't see anything major about this. Again, I could be wrong, but what do you think?
I mean, the only major things I can draw from it is this very Eastern versus Western dichotomy that is really brewing, because it seems like for some reason China and Russia totally cool to work together, even militarily. Speaking of, like, they plan to have a base on the moon that they want to build, as if there isn't one. The brewing conflict seems so strange when these countries really are working together on so much else. So I don't know what the passive aggression is, but
Right.
it is there. Next, Nazi hall discovered by Brazil police at home of suspected child abuser. I mean, you read the headline, right?
Yeah.
Police in Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro say they have found a haul of Nazi items and weapons in the home of a man suspected of abusing children. 1,000 Nazi insignias, uniforms, flags, images of Adolf. I mean, they don't say how old this guy is, but 58-year-old Alison Dora. Okay, so he wasn't around in World War II, but who did, like, the Nazis ran to South America? We know that they did, right?
Sorry, I just wanted to say, if we see here that the haul is worth 3.5 million American, which is 2.6 million euros, if I'm not mistaken, clearly the guy has money, or at least he has some type of, you know,
Or his
ability
dad
to,
was a Nazi, I guess.
or right, maybe something like this. And the fact that this haul, HAUL, for those just listening to the audio version of it, is worth that much money. I mean, my God,
No,
it
he's
clearly
not. He's a Holocaust denier.
right.
So
Interesting.
he while being a Holocaust denier, he was in full support of doing a Holocaust and buying Nazi things. So for sure, bro.
Yeah, again, when you look at things like this, it just goes to show you, when certain individuals have access to resources like guns and arms and things like that, and their sickness, in this gentleman's case pedophilia, is really
Yeah.
going to be exploited, because it's dangerous already when you have a pedophilia who just can't control their, you know, their urges, whether that's a esoteric spiritual thing or it's a
Right.
medical chemical thing. It's hard to say, but and then you give them money to be able to back that up. You have someone like Epstein, and
Hello,
then you have,
Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah.
right, exactly. The next thing is that according
Speaking
to
of,
BBC, speaking of, according to the BBC, Prince Andrew is set to receive an Epstein and Virginia Giuffre agreement. Now, if we scroll down a little more, we'll see here that Prince Andrew has been granted access to a sealed document his lawyers believe could help end the sexual abuse case being brought by Virginia Giuffre. A U.S. judge gave permission for the agreement between Ms. Giuffre and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein to be shared with the prince's lawyers. Mrs. Giuffre's lawyers had made the offer to release the document, but believe it will be irrelevant to the case. End quote. Here's the thing: you got the queen backing Andrew with the millions of dollars that we all know on record she's spending to back him up. We have recently, in the last handful of hours, I came across multiple stories in the UK saying, you know, Prince William and Charles and Princess Anne, they believe that he will never be inducted back into the royal life, so to speak, as it pertains to Andrew, and he's just an embarrassment for the family, and he's basically got to go in that regard. Here's the thing: the question becomes, are they still going to back him if the queen passes away anytime soon? What's really going to happen here?
he's second
Now,
in line, I guess. So
right, I'm for those that are members that know some of the contacts I have as it pertains to this case, I'm going to ask, and we will be asking in the
we will know.
upcoming
Yeah.
Hoffenberg series as it pertains to what the internal perspective is as it pertains
But
to this.
I mean, I hate to get so like passionate about it. Bobby Capucci really got me like angry about this, but like how disgusting. Releases the
Yeah.
Duke and others from any and all potential liabilities.
Yeah.
Are you
Yep.
fucking kidding me?
No, exactly. It's ridiculous. It's a disgrace.
Moving on. I can't.
The next thing is that according to Al Jazeera, in Afghanistan, dozens were killed in a suicide bombing at Kunduz Mosque. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. The ISIL affiliate or ISIS affiliate claims responsibility for the blast at Shia Mosque in Kunduz that has killed dozens. This is gonna be very controversial for me to say, but
Yeah.
we have to be vigilant of this, and we have to consider it. Again, just like with anything else that we discuss as it pertains to geopolitics, the only people that suffer are the innocent ones, the woman, the children, the men, the boys. It's a terrible, terrible thing. Truly, not trying to skip over that. Now, we have to also think, could this have been an intelligence operation? We don't know. And if it was not, granted, it's still it comes down to, should the West get involved? Should Europe get involved? Looking at what country it's in, where it occurred again. And if this was, it might not be a popular opinion, but we have to consider if this was an intelligence operation to slowly but surely justify a military industrial complex. I mean, going back in even more so. I mean, we can argue they're still in there, but
yeah.
I mean, sort of justification to ramp things up. But
I mean, if we look here, they claimed responsibility for it through their telegram. I mean, are we counting that as a reputable place to claim whole ass terrorist attacks? I'm just saying, like, that's
it's
easy
hard
one to get in.
This, right, exactly. And then sorry, quite ironically, with as it pertains to Telegram, this could also tie into the US government saying, you gotta hamper down on Telegram more, folks.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe I don't know the nuances, but I am under the impression that it doesn't make sense for ISIS-K, whoever they are or whatever, sell their plan. Like, why would they attack a mosque? Why are they not attacking? I mean, not that I want them to, but embassies, or why are they not attacking enemies? It seems like they are attacking their people, and that is not how you go about support.
Now, we can argue strongly right before we move on that we could say, to play devil's advocate, this is the whole Shia versus Sunni type of conflict.
Right.
But why would you want, again, it's very possible that this is straight up an ISIS thing. Don't get me wrong. But why would you want to create conflict in a region or area of the Middle East that it has just been, out of the limelight and things like that? I mean, again, depends on the region. I know there's different factions. This very well could have been, just a blatant suicide attack. But we have to be vigilant of the other potential possibilities too.
Yeah. Oil surges to $80 a barrel as global energy crunch continues. Futures in New York rose as much as 2.3% on Friday and are poised for the 7th straight weekly gain amid tightening supply. The infrastructure, I mean, I don't like that bill, but I will agree that someone needs to do something about the infrastructure because things are just sitting in ports. Even if they make it shipped, things aren't getting shipped. The inflation, infrastructure, labor gap game going on right now, whether it be systematic on purpose or just a happenstance of people got to stay home and they kind of realized they like that shit.
Yep.
It's not good for us. It is, we are getting cut off. We are getting,
Yep.
daddy is taking away the credit card. And we were really used to having it.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I mean, you take a look at, again, it's just ramping up for more and more profits. It's very clearly a manipulation you could see of the market. Now, again, you could say, Dave, everything's a manipulation of the market. Granted, case in point, right? So to be honest, that's all I really have to comment on as it pertains to that. But the next thing is that U.S. submarine, this is interesting, hits quote unquote object while underwater in South China Sea. The Navy says some members of the nuclear powered USS Connecticut's crew suffered minor injuries in the collision. This is interesting. For those that are members and that are on our Telegram, you'll know that this was covered in real time as it pertains to certain individuals that were on that submarine a handful of hours before the attack was reported, saying in Discord chats, hey, in UFO Discord chats and communities, you know, guys, I'm on a submarine and this and that, and what do you think? And this is what's happening. People thought this was a troll, and the gentleman did provide his credentials, and then later on people started putting two and two together and said, holy shit, this might have been a USO, unidentified submerged object. It's hard to say. Keep in mind, this is an attack submarine. Again, they were in the South China Sea. We don't know if China, the CCP specifically, harnessed some type of reverse engineering alien technology to do this. If this in and of itself was an extraterrestrial, you know, underwater submerged
a kaiju, a Godzilla.
Right.
You could even just point blank go, China is fucking ready for a hot war, and they flew something into it.
Right. And yeah, absolutely. And you see, I tweeted out too at the time this happened. You NDAs. See how many NDAs are going to be signed, and they probably already have been. And it's interesting to see what will happen to the soldier or the Navyman that reported this by putting it up in the Discord chat. Maybe they'll get. I
mean, this came out 2 days ago, right? And I have heard nothing else.
Right, absolutely.
Nothing else.
We'll be expanding on this too in the members episodes for those that know. Anyways, next is that Taiwan president says the island does not seek military confrontation, but amid rising tensions with China, Tsai Ing-wen says the island will do what is necessary to defend itself. Right. Again, this to me, I honestly, I see nothing wrong with her statement. Personally, she knows she has the backing of the U.S. I mean, hopefully, as we can clearly see. I don't see what's wrong with that. She's basically said she doesn't want to be, she doesn't want confrontation. It's sad to see that Taiwan is sort of being used as a proxy sort of target, if you will. Now, again, Taiwan is very valuable to the US, and we know that the CCP. I'm sure there are some Chinese people that hold this belief as well, but, that believe that Taiwan should have never been stripped from China's influence and power. But I don't know if you have anything to.
I mean, no. The next two articles are kind of flip flopping all over this Taiwan issue, because while she says that, she also says she pledges to defend sovereignty and democracy. So she's going to not want military conflict, but says it faces challenges more severe than ever in a time when tensions have risen, and it will defend its sovereignty. So what, I mean, kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like we don't want to go to war, but we absolutely will.
Yeah, I mean that's basically what I'm getting. She's trying to be sort of a, I guess, reservist, if you will, with her statements as it pertains to not trying to be too aggressive. I think that's exactly what President Xi's looking for. You give him one little bit of an inch, and he uses that. So and on top of that, I mean, again, President Tsai Ing-wen, I got to say, I've seen her speak. I really do believe that she is very happy being on the side of the U.S. Again, that's not for me to say whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but based on my personal opinion from what I've seen, that's so far what I can tell, and I don't blame her whatsoever for a multitude of reasons.
Right, and in that defend sovereignty name, the U.S. has been secretly training Taiwan forces since last year. The Wall Street Journal reports about 24 members of the U.S. military have been working with Taiwan's ground and maritime forces.
Yep. This is again.
Special
This.
operations have been in the
Yep.
Taiwan. I mean, they're ready kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. And I have to say, this is one of the things that I'll be honest with you folks, that I find to be more of an intelligence oriented apparatus, because what you have here is a small elite unit of soldiers going out to train the Taiwanese soldiers. So again, it's not for me to say whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm sure there's so many geopolitical angles to this one could take, but I don't know if you
Right.
wanted to add
No,
anything
I
to
mean
this, or
it's precarious situation that seems to be pointing at one direction, building to the head that we all thought.
right.
Lebanon power total outage as electricity grid shuts down after running out of fuel. The outage is expected to continue for a few days. They've had fuel shortages, just like we talked about, 80% on a price hike. I mean, no, it's at $80. Sorry. Lebanon's electricity grid is shut down entirely after the country's two main power stations ran out of fuel. The Al Zahrani and the Deir Ammar power station stopped working after supplies of diesel were apparently exhausted. The energy production dropped below 200 megawatts, and nobody's got power. We think that, you know, we're dealing with gas crises and energy crises, but like they're in the dark.
This was, I believe this was, in terms of being reported in the mainstream media, there was a lead up to this. It's not like we didn't see this coming.
Right.
With that being said, though, again, guys, I'm so sorry that I have to even say this, or consider it, but we have to consider the fact that this, again, could be some form of an intelligence operation. And if it wasn't in the beginning, maybe some agencies around the world caught on as they noticed the outage and said, hey, we can exploit this situation, sort of as a way of, you know, realigning the different geopolitical powers and strategies relative to not just Lebanon, but the surrounding countries. So,
I mean, it's tragic. And
if I'm the
like lemon
right,
yeah.
I'm just thinking, if this was not an intelligence op, if I'm the CIA or MI6 or, you know, Mossad or whatever, and I have, you know, vying interests in maybe not Lebanon, or not just Lebanon, but the surrounding regions and nations, I'm going to say, my God, there's an outage in the country. Let's get some of our agents in there, because it's much harder for the
Literal dark
Lebanese.
ops. Yeah.
Literal dark operations for the Lebanese government it's much difficult for them to surveil and what have you. Let's get some assets or agents in there, and let's, you know,
I mean, it
push
could
our
have happened
agenda.
as simply as here at the end. It happened after 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate used as fertilizer and explosives caught fire after being stored unsafely at a port warehouse.
Right.
It took everything up with it. I mean, no one's ever had an investigation into how it caught fire, but
We could argue as well too, one last thing before we get to the final story, that the Beirut explosion, there was a lot of officials within the Lebanese government that didn't want the investigation to proceed, but a judge ruled that it can. It's very possible this blackout could be an attempt at a major distraction from the Beirut explosion case. So the final thing is that, according to the BBC, a Massachusetts man who faked his own death over COVID release scam has been sentenced. If we scroll down here a little bit more, and I quote, David Stavely Falsey claimed to co-own 4 large businesses in need of nearly $544,000 or 399,000 euros in support from a federal government program. After being charged last year, Stavely staged a suicide and fled using false identities and stolen license plates. He tried to scam a COVID-19 business aid scheme. And
he took PPP loans, and people have taken a lot of them. I know someone in the town closest to me that's gone to jail over this too. So like, people did really take advantage of them, and it's not like the government isn't going to get their money back.
Well, I could say as well too that for the individuals in Canada that abused the CERB payments, which is like the sort of PPP payments relative to the US, what happened with a lot of people was they were taking employment insurance, if I'm not mistaken, those that had children, you know, child benefits and all that, plus the CERB payments, and they were still going to work. So a lot of people got arrested, but it got to the point where it was something like, I'm not kidding, folks, $600 or $700 million Trudeau had said in the last handful of months were like sort of abused by the everyday Canadian citizen in the last year and a half. They basically said that they're just going to back charge you on the taxes, essentially, instead of constantly wanting to round people up and arrest them. Now, for numbers like this gentleman, I could see why cops would go out of the way to arrest someone in their home. But in terms of if you scam the government, at least in Canada, from what I hear and I read and see, if you scam the government out of, 10, 20, even 30K, you're going to get screwed on your taxes. The
Right.
CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency, our version of the IRS, will be on you. But yeah. Anything else you wanted to add there, Camden, or?